Many of my colleagues and MPs are rushing every day to your office. But however, I think we have upside down priorities. For one, what Wajir now needs is actually a very serious water investment. In the countries like Egypt and all those places where it never rains, they never realize any water scarcity. They depend on the River Nile. And we have similar rivers that flows within the neighborhood of Wajir. We can have some water from Tana River. We can have water from Sosiro. We can have water from Dawa. All these places. Therefore, but I think I don't know what the ministry has as a master plan. I'm aware that in 2013, 2017, up to 2022, there was a major dam that was supposed to be constructed in a place called Butte. Butte is actually one of the high potential areas at the slopes of, the end towards the end of, or the start of the Ethiopian highlands. But that business, that dam has not been constructed up to now. We are wondering what's happening. It will have been one of our best, investments that will be able to do at least irrigation and water for people use and livestock. One other thing I'm asking is actually, Madam Speaker, how sustainable is PPP business in water? Because the any investor also wants to have a quick return for any investment. So how will PPP work for water? That's actually the question I want to know from you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry, Madam CS.
Madam CS.
Thank you. The Honorable Senator for Wajir. Thank you for the question, Honorable Speaker. Maybe the answer to that particular question is that it is true there are no rivers in Garissa, in Wajir, but we have underground water. We have quite a good amount of water in the aquifers. At the moment, we have a program that we are doing our investigative survey, data collection, and assessment of the amount of water within maybe the combined or the shared aquifer between Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. We have an aquifer covering that region, and we have funding, and the project has already commenced. We have a 20 billion funding to cover Wajir, Garissa, Turkana, Madera, and Marsabit, where the main effort is to do our analysis and find out how much water we have in the aquifers and how much can be available to be used by the three countries. Because being an aquifer, it is a shared water resource, and therefore one country may not proceed to exploit that alone without cooperation with the other countries. And then you ask the question on Dana River clusters, the dams. Our study on this particular river is complete. Again, we do the work and look for budget. Honorable Speaker, we can be able to farm about 20,000 acres. The study is ready, and we will be moving forward with seeking for resources for this particular project, and it will turn that area into a different place. Of course, we have additional work that is planned for boreholes and water pans as the other alternative. The boreholes become a big challenge in that area. Sometimes to reach the borehole, and when you reach the borehole, then maybe the salt levels, is a challenge. But also that there are cases where we get a borehole done for community, and some cartels take over the water resource or the water borehole, and they run as individuals. So I think, Honorable Speaker, that requires also the community effort and leadership support, because when we have a borehole that is taken over by one or two people, and they are guarding it with arms. Insecurity issues arise. I'm not saying that is happening in his particular area, but generally that is a challenge for Marsabit, Mandela, Garissa, and Wajir.
Okay, very well. Let's now go to the next question. What is it, Senator Abbas? And actually, you have been given a very comprehensive answer, like she had all the information.
One question. The question for the Butte Dam, which has taken almost now 15 years to start. What is the position?
I believe Butte Dam is in the first is in the first lot of the expression of interest that we have taken up among the 33 dams that we have called for expression of interest under PPP. I want to say that we don't really have funding for big dams because of the physical space that we have. Including smaller dams, we are working with a very constrained budget, and that's why as a country we have appreciated and we think the space and opportunity for public-private investment is here and now. So we believe we'll be able to do them through PPPs.
Thank you. Let's go to question number 042. Senator for Kirinyaga County. Or you are satisfied with your problems? I can see. As the question number 42042.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am satisfied with the first question that I asked. And in fact, what the CS said is true that we were with the PS for irrigation, Kemodo and also Engineer Mwasi and Ambund, and they did a wonderful job. We were there for a whole day. My second question is for the CS, maybe to explain why the Kakuyuine irrigation water project that was meant to earn more than 500 acres under activation to my irrigation scheme in Wamumu and Kirinyaga County, why it has taken too long to implement. And on the same, could the Cabinet Secretary appraise the Senate on the status of its implementation and indicate whether any funds have been allocated to the project in the financial year 2023-2024? And lastly, on the same question, is the CS to provide a tentative commencement and completion timelines for the project so that the over 100 intended beneficiaries can benefit, and the President's stated intention to increase land under irrigation and improve on security through increased rice production to make sure the increased rice production is achieved? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Madam CS.
Honorable Speaker, the question on Gakuyuni irrigation water project that was meant to add more than 500 acres under cultivation to Mwea irrigation scheme in Wamomo ward, Kirinyaga County, why it has taken long to implement. Honorable Speaker, the ministry through NIA, that is the National Irrigation Authority, is mandated to increase area under irrigation agriculture. A request was made by farmers at Gakuyuni water project on 20th of August 2020 to have their farmlands provided with water for irrigation infrastructure for that purpose and benefit the farmers. In their request, the farmers highlighted that construction of canals and provision of water control structures such as gates would help convey and control distribution of water Survey was carried out to confirm the feasibility of the project. The potential was found to be 1,250 acres as the command area extended beyond the boundaries of Gakuyuni. As a result, for inclusivity of these farmers, the project was renamed as Marurumo Irrigation Expansion. Design for the project was accomplished, paving way for the construction works, which commenced on 6th of April 2022. The Wayleaf acquisition process by farmers and NIA and ongoing farming activities slowed the progress because you have to wait maybe for the harvest. The project is scheduled to be completed, however, in November 2023. There was a slow start because of those challenges, but it is ongoing. Then could the Cabinet Secretary appraise the Senate on the status of its implementation and whether any funds have been allocated this financial year? The Honorable Speaker, the overall status of the implementation of the project is at 88%, and I have summarized there and given the data for that particular completion status, saying that at Marurumo expansion area, 109.88 work done. That is the expansion. You know, the canals that we. These are canals. No? Yes, 109. 88 are done, and then below you can see we have done 6. We still have a balance of 24. In total, canals and drains are expected to occupy about 40 kilometers, and so far we have 88 out of 109. Honorable Speaker, no, we are at 88% completion, and the totals that we have done are listed there. For padding work is listed, that is 21, 24, and 10. The funds for implementation of the project have been factored in this financial year. The value of the remaining work is 17.8 million. The total project cost is about 100 million Kenya shillings, and at 88%. Finally, I have been asked to provide a tentative commencement and completion timeline. I think I've just gone ahead so that the 1,000 extended beneficiaries can benefit, and the President's stated intention to increase land under irrigation in the general area to improve food production or food security, where we hope to cover a total of 35,000 acres of rice farming. And so far we are at around 30,000 acres, producing around 130,000 cubic tons of rice. Honorable Speaker, the work will be completed on 30th of November. That is our target date. We intend to achieve that, and the project started 16th of April 2022. So I think we are basically within the timelines, because if we started at on 6th of April and now we are telling this House, and I confirm that we shall work with this timeline, Honorable Speaker, to the Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murango, do you have any supplementary question?
Mr. Speaker, I will just request maybe for the hand copy of the reply from the Cabinet Secretary for my filing. Maybe for the...
You want some evidence?
Yes, I need some evidence.
Yeah, fine.
Yes.
If that is your supplementary question, then yes, maybe.
However, Mr. Speaker, I'm contented with the answer given. And again, I want to thank the CS for Water and also the office, I can see the PS there, together with the engineers, because I can say that when we had the last visit that we had in Kirinyaga on the same Moi irrigation scheme, the team was dedicated from 8 o'clock to 6. When we covered a lot of ground on the same, we met the farmers. We had we had some time to have some rice, and it was a good experience, and the people of Kirinyaga are really happy about that. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the CS office and the whole of our team for our work well done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Madam CS, you have a comment on that?
I cannot, just on the request for a copy, we have provided that to the director or the person who was communicating with my office, but if it has not reached the Senate, we will ensure that a soft copy is sent as soon as I leave the office.
You
The
get
Senate.
a copy from
Yes.
the secretary.
Yes.
You have the copy already, Madam CS. Even in the next 2 minutes, he can get his copy. Then let's get a supplementary question from Isiolo Senator and Andulo Fatuma.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask a general question from the CS. And I want to congratulate her because this is the first time we have interacted since she was appointed. Mr. Speaker, there is a major problem, especially in the areas where Mount Kenya is and the people who are living downstream, where the rich people are actually blocking the flow of the water from upstream to downstream. I don't know whether that has been brought to the attention of the CS to see how she can be able to unlock the water that is actually blocked by the rich men and or business people in Mount Kenya area, so that we can have enough water, especially if I may speak for Isiolo County. And I know, Mr. Speaker, you are smiling. I'm sure some of your area is also suffering from the same problem. I thank you.
Did you say I'm smiling, Senator Nduro? All the CS? Because you must be having very sharp eyes from where you are.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, maybe according to me, you are happy with the issue I've raised, now that you are on the other side. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy because you know all that belt. You know, the majority leader has interrupted my response to you, so let that go. Let us get the response from the CS.
It is possible, Honorable Speaker, that some water extractions are illegal because ordinarily Water Resource Authority is supposed to allow for extraction, and they regulate in the permit that is given, they regulate the amount of water you can extract. But sometimes we are having maybe the Honorable Senator is referring them to rich men. I hope that they are also rich men and women. But there are people who are farming without sometimes the knowledge in terms of extracting the water. And those are illegal extractors. And we are working hard. We have constrained human resource because sometimes you require our officers to visit the river, either downstream or upstream, wherever the activities are. And sometimes even when we disconnect, because we disrupt by disconnection, you also find that again, after we leave, the surveillance, you know, we don't have our own enforcement in terms of police, but we rely on the same police. The surveillance become very, very tedious. And I want to say that we will possibly, the Honorable Senator could give me specific rivers so that we can address specific area with the specific results expected. And we will definitely want to know who are those who are extracting and ensuring that the entire river is dry, for example, because the control should be there of how much you can extract in total in terms of the river flow. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CS. Senator Khalil Joyce.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me to congratulate Madam CS for the good work that she's doing in the ministry. I know it's the first time that I'm also interacting with her since she has been appointed, but I've been watching her movements across the country, and the issue that is also trying to solve the issues of water across the country. Honorable Speaker, allow me also to thank Madam CS and the ministry for a project that has stalled for some years, around 7 years, that is the Poster Dam project that is covering 3 counties, that is Kericho, Bomet, and Nakuru County. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that I must thank the ministry for giving the project priority in terms of allocations, where right now, Honorable Speaker, I know there is something good that is taking place. And the residents of those counties have really been waiting for this project, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I know Madam Chair is a hard-working CS. We've been able to work with her when she was a women representative. And we had a movement by the name Inua Mama, where we moved across the country. And one of the main agendas that she used to talk when she was a chair was that she was going...
I beg your pardon. Did you say the CS was women led?
Yes, she was a member of parliament, Honorable Speaker. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When she was a member of parliament, we had appointed her as our chair for the Inua Mama movement, which was supporting the government by then.
She is now...
protect me, Honorable Speaker.
I
from
think...
the senator from Baringo.
let us hear from him what is his point of order.
Okay.
Chair, you know I normally don't interrupt, but I thought she was right by saying she was the women rep herself that time. And the CS was a member of parliament. Does she deny also she was not a women
Are you
rep?
trying to prove that I did not hear properly what
Yeah.
you said?
I think I was right.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yeah, you know, they normally say the Speaker doesn't have eyes nor ears, but you caught me clearly, Honorable Speaker. Indeed, Madam CS was a member of parliament, and having been my chair of Inua Mama, we crisscrossed this country and promising the Kenyans that we were going to handle the issues that were affecting majorly the women. And that is water, Honorable Speaker. We didn't even knew that she was going to handle that docket. But I can say, Madam Honorable Speaker, that indeed she's up to the task. And I want to say that there are a number of challenges that the Kenyans are facing because of the droughts, because of the forest degradation, and a number of them. And I want to challenge Madam CS that as the Environment Ministry is also fighting in terms of doing the afforestation. I would challenge Madam Speaker, Honorable Speaker, Madam CS, that he also goes ahead, because I know the women reps have also been supplying water tanks to various schools. There are a number of schools that they have the water tanks, they don't have the cutters. I would request that the ministry, in conjunction with the Ministry of Environment, assist a number of schools so that at least they can do the water harvesting for the schools to be able to even assist for the water to be used by the students or the pupils in terms of even handling the issues of environment and even the issues of water usages in schools, Honorable Speaker. Otherwise, I just wanted to stand and appreciate her for the good work that she's doing, and also urge the minister to do that collection of the waters in schools and to assist us in actualizing the Boster Dam water project. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Madam CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to appreciate the Honorable Joyce Koriu. Yes, we did a lot of work with the Honorable member the previous term. And I believe so therefore my work, I think the question is to ensure that my work is also looking at the issue of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, because during most of our meetings, there were water supplies, water tanks that we supplied during the program that was called Inua Mama. I want to confirm to the honorable member, water harvesting and storage being one of our mandates, we are supplying, funds being available, we are supplying through the 9 agencies. At different times, different schools, we are supplying water tanks. And there are also instances where we actually build or construct the still water tanks depending on the need. So yes, we need to increase our efforts so that possibly the number, and I believe every school, Honorable Speaker, should have a certain minimum number of water storage and good harvesting roof for purposes of some water. And those are programs that we can do together even with the constituency development fund in terms of water for schools. And I believe that we will increase our numbers because the demands, according to the population demand increase, also is rising. I appreciate the good commendation the Honorable Senator has given.
Okay, thank you, Madam CS. Let's get the last supplementary question from the Senator Mohamed Chute, Marsabit County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam CS, let me also congratulate you for coming here today, and also similarly congratulate you for coming to Marsabit. You came to Marsabit some months back. I know you got some issues there, banditry issue. I'm sorry about that. It was very scary. Madam, I got a phone call from Marsabit a few minutes ago. And the questions people in Marsabit are asking, when you came to Marsabit, you promised to come and open Bakuli, and the date was supposed to be on the 13th of June, 2023. And now, today is 2nd August, 2023. Madam CS, you came before us one time. We had CS Miano, who came before us also, and recently CS for Health. And your performance, the two of you, is excellent performance. I don't know who is going to take position 1, 2, or 3, but that one is subject to discussion for another day. But I really congratulate you. You are making us proud. But then, this question for Marsabit, can you please give us a tentative day, consult with your people so that the people in Marsabit are watching. I want them to be happy. I know, you know, Marsabit, we have issues of water shortages. And the biggest problem is the water line, the piping. Please address the piping issue also and give us a date. And once again, thank you very much for coming today.
Madam CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Honorable Senator, yes, it is true I was in Marsabit. The experience was very scary because I was evacuated from the Marsabit forest by a platoon of, of GSU or men in uniform. And I later learned that some resident, one of those who were involved in that particular incident, wasn't targeted. It's good that I say the attack was not targeted at me, but of course I could have been caught within that crossfire. But and I was evacuated. I went down the vehicle, and it wasn't very nice. That was a close experience with the fire being exchanged. But and somebody died, which is unfortunate. But those are the kind of things that we are saying we need to eliminate, because no one should lose their lives. I did promise that I would be coming back, and this particular Bakuli Dam basically is at 95% complete. There was a small issue of the wayleaf within town because of encroachment. And I believe the Honorable Senator, you know that. I didn't ask, as I was coming here, because this is a supplementary question, I will get my CEO, Tana Water Services, because they are the ones doing that project, to let me know, together with the Northern Water Development Works. I will find out whether that small issue is over. But I have presented this particular project to the office of the president to see whether the president himself would be able to find time and put it in his schedule to have this particular project opened by the president so that we can benefit from his visit, and particularly so that he can help us pick the issue of Badasa Dam that is also in the pipeline. So maybe that is why I haven't come. Either way, once that is cleared, we shall be coming to Marsabit. Thank you very much.
So, Madam CS, let's now get this last one from Senator Bungoma, David Wakoli.
Thank you. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii, na vile vile kumshukuru waziri kwa kazi ambayo unafanya na kudhihirisha wa Kenya kwamba kando na kuwa mwanasiasa, mwanamke pia na uwezo wa kufanya kazi kando na kanuni za kijinsia zilizowekwa na tamaduni zetu. Swali langu Mheshimiwa Waziri, tumeona miradi mingi ya maendeleo ya maji katika kaunti mbalimbali za humu nchini. Kule Bungoma tuna mradi wa maji kule Mlima Elgon ambao unafadhiliwa na nchi za kigeni, ambao tunashukuru unaenda kuchangia pakubwa kwa wakazi wa mji wa Bungoma na kaunti nzima kupata maji hadi kaunti ya Busia. Langu ni je, katika mustakabali wa mipangilio ya serikali, ni mradi upi mwingine wa kitaifa ambao umeratibiwa katika bajeti ambao unaenda kunufaisha watu wa Bungoma, ambao tunanufaisha watu wa Kakamega ambao ni majirani zetu, ili watu wanaposherekea na kumwagia heko, hata sisi tusipitwe katika miradi yako ya maendeleo ya maji. Naelewa fika kwamba tumekuwa tunajadiliana nawe kupitia vyombo mbalimbali, na baadaye najua tutaendelea kuzungumza, lakini kwa sababu wanasikiza kutoka kule nyanjani, itakuwa tu vyema kutaja kwa kifupi ni mradi upi ambao tunaenda kupata, kwa sababu walikuwa wanatazamia kwamba katika mipangilio yako maji ya Nabuyole yataweza kutumiwa kuunda bwawa ambalo litatupa maji katika maeneo bunge zaidi ya 8. Sitaki kwenda mengi Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kutaraji kwa moyo mkunjufu jibu la Mheshimiwa Waziri. Asante.
Mheshimiwa Waziri.
I will try. First, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the question. Maybe I could first tell you that we have a project worth 4.4 billion shillings for irrigation. Location is Kuyua, Lunyu, Tongareni, Webuye, Bungoma County. We have water source at Livazoya, and this particular project is around that. We are rethinking of how to improve and expand the irrigation scheme around that area using gravity flow. And so I want to tell you that we are at a very advanced stage. The intake requires a new chamber, I think, 4-head works, intake chamber, conveyance, pipelines. There is a lot of work that we have planned for that. This feasibility study is complete, and so that is for purposes of irrigation. But we also have, I don't know which project you are referring to, but we have a Gororo water project. Kenya and the Nile Basin countries are involved in that, and it is one of the projects, major projects in Western Kenya, going for about 8 billion shillings. But we also have Bungoma, Kakamega water supply for the 2 counties that was actually secured. A contract was not a full contract, but an award was granted, but for purposes of EPCF, engineering, construction, and funding, engineering, procurement, construction, and funding. But you know where we are in terms of physical space, so it went slow. We are trying to see how to revive that particular project to supply water in Bungoma and Kakamega. And I think it will be, if I'm not wrong, it will be our answer to some of the challenges there. For Vihiga, you know, I went to Vihiga the other day. The head of state was a guest, and he launched Vihiga Water Supply, which is a project of about 2 billion Kenya shillings. And he did promise additional, is it three or about 300 million Kenya shillings to assist Vihiga County with the distribution last mile. So I believe I can give you details later if you need more details. So that project, we have not killed that project for both counties, Bungoma and Kakamega, and we are working to see whether it will be under EPCF, very concessionary terms, or PPP. And I believe we will be moving it forward.
Thank you, Madam CS. And that comes to the head of the 2 questions session. And we want to thank you for availing yourself to respond to the questions raised by the Murang'a Senator, James Murango. And also to appreciate that you are able to answer questions, supplementary questions, which you are not prepared to come and answer. So that shows you are not the type of CSAs. The president yesterday mentioned that some do not understand their dockets. So I want to inform the president from the chair that the CA's water is informed. She understands her docket well. Now that I came to the seat here, the issues of Meru, I'll be able to reach to you so that we agree on when we come with my team. So thank you, Madam CS, and all the best as you serve Kenyans.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind remarks, and the ed was good. Thank you, Asanteni Sana. Thank you, Honorable Senators. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the time and space. Thank you.
The other question was to be replied by the CS. Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action. The CS wrote a letter. She's not available today, so that matter will be rescheduled. The SBC will be able to allocate her some time, maybe when she will appear. But I will caution her not to be writing letters to the Senate during the last minute after the business is scheduled. So that is done. Therefore, now we go to the next order.
Order number 8, motion, integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya.
Yes, Senator William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move this motion, but in an amended form, pursuant to Standing Order 62, and you will be able to realize the amendments, Chair, as I read the motion. Mr. Speaker, I move the motion that are aware that Kenya is multi-ethnic country with a rich diversity of culture and language and traditions. Further aware that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities face significant social, economic, and political challenges, including discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Acknowledging that Article 10, Subarticle 2B, Article 21, Subarticle 3, Article 27, 58, 91, Subarticle 1E, Article 10, Article 174E, 177(1)C, Article 204, Subarticle 3B, Article 216, Subarticle 4, and the fifth schedule to the Constitution of Kenya obligates the state to promote and protect the welfare of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities, appreciating that the government has put in place policies, legal and institutional framework, including affirmative action programs to address the needs of other special interest groups, namely children, persons with disabilities, youth, women, and the elderly, concerned that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities remain largely unaddressed through similar interventions due to lack of an existing national policy and legislative framework. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and the Directorate of National Cohesion and Values in the Office of the President, and any other relevant state department, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, 1, initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a motion that is intended to bring about integration and inclusion of the minorities and marginalized communities, Mr. Speaker, in our country. Our 2010 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that is under Chapter 4 on Bill of Rights, recognizes and protects human rights and fundamental freedoms for every Kenyan. And if you read Article 20, Sub-Article 2, Mr. Speaker, every Kenyan, irrespective of his or her ethnic background, status, religion, shall enjoy the rights and fundamental freedoms to the greatest extent consistent with the nature of that right and fundamental freedoms. And Mr. Speaker, Article 21, Sub-Article 3, what I'm doing, Mr. Speaker, is just to show the House the constitutional provisions that I will be relying even as I move this motion. Mr. Speaker, Article 21, Sub-Article 3 recognizes several vulnerable groups in our society whose rights should be recognized and protected. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about a small section of our society, that is the women, the elderly members of our society, persons with disability, children, youth. But this motion, Mr. Speaker, relates to members of minority and marginalized communities in our country. Mr. Speaker, as I said, Article 21, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution obligates the state organs to address the needs of the vulnerable groups by coming up with legislative policies and other measures to achieve realization of the rights of those groups. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution, in very clear and mandatory terms, by usage of the word shall, places that responsibility in the state and all the state organs. Mr. Speaker, it is my humble submission to this House that the state has, to a very large extent, Mr. Speaker, placed the policies, legal and institutional framework, affirmative action programs to address the needs of the children, women, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. To that extent, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the House the state has done very well in coming up with those legislative and affirmative action. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we have the Youth and Enterprises Fund. That is why we have the Women Enterprises Fund, the cash transfers for the elderly, and other social assistance programs, Mr. Speaker, catering for the orphans, vulnerable children, and so on. And Mr. Speaker, the effects of this affirmative action for these vulnerable groups I've talked about is that these groups now have significantly benefited from these affirmative actions by both national and the county government. These interventions has enabled the groups to attain inclusivity, creating opportunities, and ensuring their active participation in various aspects of society. Mr. Speaker, that is really the spirit of our Constitution 2010, that irrespective of your status, as much as you may be vulnerable, you don't have resources, you are minorities, minority in a particular situation, the Constitution requires that the government, the state, should be able to put in place measures and affirmative action to mainstream those groups now in all aspects of society. Mr. Speaker, the sad story is that whereas the state has, to a large extent, addressed the needs of the interests of the vulnerable groups I've mentioned, as the children, the women, the elderly, the people with disabilities, and so on. The state, Mr. Speaker, and I submit that they has completely ignored, refused, and or neglected to address the needs of the marginalized and minorities as required under Article 21, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the state has even made it worse by not implementing Article 56 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, allow me to refer to that particular article of the Constitution so that the House really appreciates what I'm saying. Mr. Speaker, Article 56 of the Constitution says, the state shall, again, Mr. Speaker, in mandatory terms, by usage of the word shall, put in place affirmative action programs designed to ensure that minorities and marginalized groups, A, participate and are represented in governance and other spheres of life, are provided special opportunities in education and economic fields, are provided special opportunities for access to employment, develop their culture values, and, Mr. Speaker, have reasonable access to water, health, services, and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, that is the sad situation we face in the country today. Whereas the vulnerable groups identified in Article 21, Sub-Article 3, some have been taken care of. These minorities and marginalized groups, Mr. Speaker, have not been taken into account. But, Mr. Speaker, maybe it is important for the country and for this House to understand the definition of marginalized. Mr. Speaker, I take the House to Article 260. Article 260, Mr. Speaker. And I want to define marginalized groups as defined by the Constitution. A community that, because of its relatively small population or for any other reason, has been unable to fully participate in the integrated social and economic life of Kenya as a whole. A traditional community that, out of a need or desire to preserve its unique culture and identity from assimilation, has remained outside the integrated socio-economic life of Kenya as a whole. Further definition, an indigenous community that has retained and maintained a traditional lifestyle or livelihood based on a hunter or gathering economy. And finally, Mr. Speaker, pastoral persons and communities where they are nomadic and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about an imaginary group of people in the country. I'm talking of a group of people recognized in our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want the country to know that we have a total of 3,573,749 Kenyans who fall under that category, Mr. Speaker, defined in Article 260. That is, Mr. Speaker, 9.3% of our population. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, that we have ignored the well-being of 9.3% of our population in not mainstreaming them in participating and integrating them with the other people? Mr. Speaker, there are 79 minorities in our country, spread across 26 counties in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, Baringo is one of them, where I represent, where you have the El Chamus, a small community in some 2 wards in Baringo. You have the Kikuyu community in Aldama Ravine, in 1 or 2 wards. We have the Nubians, a very small population. We have the Kisis, we have the Somalis, and so on. I'm just referring to my county. But Mr. Speaker, Taita Taveta, represented by my brother Munkatana here, Tana River, Taita Taveta, Wachia, Kilifi, Mombasa, Migori. I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, 27 counties with that situation of minorities, totaling 3,573,000 and so on. And so, Mr. Speaker, what is before the House today is a national issue. And Mr. Speaker, if you read 174 of the Constitution, allow me to take the House there, Mr. Speaker, because I want to show that the framers of the Constitution, which I had the chance of being one, Mr. Speaker, because at the time I was the Assistant Minister of Justice. 174, Mr. Speaker, talks about the objectives of devolution. Let me take the House there. Article 174, objects of devolution. That is 174E. The objects of the devolution of governments are, you talk of A, B, C, D, but when you go to E, Mr. Speaker, is to protect and promote the interests and rights of minorities and marginalized communities. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm not just addressing the responsibility of the national government. I'm addressing also the responsibility of the county governments. Because the whole reason, one of the reasons why we went for devolution is also to address that. Again, Mr. Speaker, I don't think the counties are also doing very well in terms of mainstreaming and integrating the minorities in their day-to-day functions. Mr. Speaker, I've talked about that Article 56, which we have not been able to implement, the state has not been able to implement. Mr. Speaker, the consequences of not actualizing the provisions of Article 56, the consequences of not coming up with programs and affirmative action under Article 21, sub-Article 3, the consequences, Mr. Speaker, of the county governments not implementing even that provision of the objectivity of devolution under 174 is that these minorities have not been able to participate represented in governments, national and county governments. They have not been able to access employment. They have been ignored. They have been neglected. And Mr. Speaker, if you read those items under Article 56, are really clear as to the areas where we have been able to fail. So, Mr. Speaker, the foundation of this motion is premised upon the fact that we have for a very long time ignored, excluded the minorities and the marginalized communities in our country. 27 senators in this House, Mr. Speaker, were voted in by those minorities. It is only prudent, Mr. Speaker, that those of us in this House today who benefited, who were voted in by those minorities, Mr. Speaker, should be able to compel, through a resolution of this House, Mr. Speaker, the state and the county governments, Mr. Speaker, to do exactly what we are seeking in this motion. And what are we seeking, Mr. Speaker, in this motion? We are seeking that the county, the state, and the county governments, Mr. Speaker, should initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by ethnic minorities in our country. Mr. Speaker, it is important to identify those needs and address them. 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of these minorities in Kenya as envisaged in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the intention and the constitutional provisions is intended to mainstream, to allow the minorities to be part and parcel of our development. Mr. Speaker, we talk of a united country, a country that is united by values, values of a united nation where we belong to this country, served by the same government, Mr. Speaker, served by the same constitution. It is wrong. And I think the time, Mr. Speaker, has come for this House to stand firm, pass this motion. And Mr. Speaker, when the time comes for us now as a House to pass the appropriate legislation, Mr. Speaker, I am sure that my colleagues will be able to stand firm and pass the laws that will make those minorities in our place, those in El Chamus, in Baringo County, the Kikuyu community in Baringo, in Lamba Ravine, the Nubians in Mokotio, and in Kabarnet, and in Marigat. They should be part and parcel of that community, Mr. Speaker. The Pokot Nation, which is in Tiatei constituency, which is in Baringo County, Mr. Speaker. These are Kenyans who will feel recognized. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, for all the other counties, I don't want to mention them because, Mr. Speaker, I don't have the time. But as I said before, this is a national conversation we need to engage in. It's a national challenge we need to deal with so that, Mr. Speaker, those marginalized in our communities will feel part and parcel of this country, part and parcel of the development that we enjoy in our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to stop there and plead with my colleagues that let us debate this motion and pass it. Mr. Speaker, I move, and I want to request my learned junior, Senator Mungatana, to second this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bwana Spika, napenda kuchukua nafasi hii kwanza kumpa kongole Mheshimiwa wa Baringo William Cheptumo ambaye alimaliza mwaka mmoja mbele yangu tukiwa huko shuleni tukisomea sheria. Nampongeza kwa kuleta hoja hii hapa bungeni la Senate. Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba tangu uhuru ulipoanza tumekuwa na ugandamizaji wa kabila ndogo ndogo katika mfumo wa kisiasa na kiuchumi hapa nchini kwetu Kenya. Bwana Spika, historia inatuonyesha ya kwamba mkoloni alipokuwa anatawala Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania na nchi hii, sehemu hii yote, alichagua namna ya kuwatawala watu wengi pale kwa kuwapatia nafasi za ofisi kubwa kubwa wale ambao waliamua kufanya kazi na mkoloni. Na kwa sababu ya hivyo, Bwana Spika, ilipatikana kwamba wakati mkoloni yuko pale mamlakani, kulikuwa Waafrika wengine wachache ambao walichaguliwa kuwa machifu wakubwa ambao walishirikiana na mkoloni kugandamiza wale Waafrika wengine, na wao wakapata nafasi kujiendeleza kiuchumi na kinafasi za kiserikali. Bwana Spika, Rais wa Kenya wa kwanza Jomo Kenyatta alipochukua mamlaka hakubadilisha mwelekeo huo. Ndio maana wengine walisema ya kwamba mzungu aliondoka, mzungu mweupe aliondoka, lakini mzungu mweusi alikuja. Manake mambo mengi hayakubadilishwa. Kabila ndogo ndogo ziliendelea kugandamizwa, Mheshimiwa, na ndio maana hoja hii ni muhimu leo tuizungumze. Sisi ambao tunatoka kwa kabila ndogo ndogo lazima tuyaseme haya ili tuelewane ya kwamba Kenya hii tuko na tunaishi na tuko hapa, tuondoke. Bwana Spika, hawakugeuza haya, waliendelea hivyo hivyo. Na Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, ugandamizaji huu ulienda ukaelekezwa kwamba nafasi za kiserikali kwa watu wa Tana River miaka ya Jomo Kenyatta ilikuwa ni chache. Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, iliendelezwa tu kwamba sehemu zile za watu wengi ndio walipata nafasi. Vile vile mkoloni alikuwa anafanya, ndivyo rais wa kwanza alifanya. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia katika masomo ya watu ambao wamesoma haya mambo university, utaona rais wa pili pia alifuata nyayo. Yeye mwenyewe alisema mimi nitafuata nyayo za Rais Jomo Kenyatta, na kweli alifuata nyayo, Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, na akachukua uongozi ule ule na akafanya vile vile. Makabila madogo madogo, Bwana Spika, yalishushwa chini na kuendelezwa kugandamizwa miaka hiyo, Bwana Spika. Ukiangalia Bwana Spika, katika table ama hizi research ambazo zimefanywa kwa universities, utaona Bwana Spika ya kwamba makatibu wa kudumu, wakubwa wa mashirika ya kiserikali, wafanyikazi wa kiserikali, utakuta nafasi za wale wachache wa makabila zilikuwa ni ndogo sana. Bwana Spika, ikafika nafasi ya kwamba wengine unakuta katika department nzima ya serikali ama shirika la serikali watu wanaongea lugha ya kimama ya kinyumbani. Bwana Spika, hoja hii ni muhimu sana ili watu waanze kuelewana na tujaribu kugeuza mambo ambayo yamekuwa donda sugu katika hali ya uchumi na kisiasa hapa Kenya. Bwana Spika, rais wa 3 ambaye tunamsifu sana, yeye alijaribu, lakini mambo yale yale yaliendelea. Rais wa 4 hivyo hivyo, Bwana Spika. Na tulipopata hii katiba mpya na vile vipengele vyote ambavyo Mheshimiwa Cheptumo amevitaja, katiba hii mpya inasema, Bwana Spika, tujaribu kuleta mabadiliko katika hali ya usimamizi, uchumi, hali ya usimamizi, nafasi za kiserikali, hali za usimamizi katika mashirika ya kiserikali, kwamba makabila madogo, Bwana Spika, yahusishwe na yaingizwe katika serikali. Bwana Spika, tunajua mabadiliko yanaendelea na tunajaribu kuyazungumza haya ili haya yawe katika akili za wale watu ambao wako na nafasi serikalini kwa wakati huu. Bwana Spika, tunachukua nafasi hii kupitia mswada huu yasemwe kiwaziwazi ya kwamba shida hizi mawaziri ambao wamechaguliwa katika ofisi zao waanze kuzitatua, na seneti leo, Bwana Spika, inasema waanze kuzitatua namna hii. Waziri akiwa na ile nafasi ya kuchagua watu direct, yani watu ambao wanachagua kwa mkono wake. Usichague watu ambao ni wa kabila lako peke yake. Jaribu kugeuza, jaribu kuweka hali ambayo inafaa katika wizara yako. Manake ukianza wewe kushuka chini, makatibu watafuata, madirekta watafuata, watu wa ngazi za chini watafuata. Mawaziri wakiwa katika serikalini, waangalie wale ambao wanachukua nafasi katika organizations za serikali, wajaribu kuingiza watu ambao wanatoka sehemu za watu ambao pia hatuna makabila makubwa. Bwana Spika, sahi ukiangalia Tana River, Bwana Spika, hakuna hata managing director mmoja katika parastatal yoyote ya Kenya tunavyoongea sahi, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, Tana River sahi tunaangalia na watu wanaangalia na wanaona machungu yako, na haya mazungumzo lazima tuyaseme ili wanaosikia wajaribu kugeuza. Tunangojea, Bwana Spika, tuone pengine ambao wameshika manafasi. Manake sisi tangu uhuru hatujapata waziri kamili. Tumepata, mimi mwenyewe nimetumikia, Bwana Spika, kama waziri msaidizi, lakini waziri kamili hatujapata kutoka kaunti ya Tana River, na najua kaunti zingine pia hawajapata. Lakini tunasema mabadiliko yafanyike, waleo na nafasi wageuze, ili sisi sote tujisikie tu wana Kenya. Lakini Bwana Spika, hata baada ya kupitishwa hii katiba ambayo ilileta gatuzi 47 Kenya nzima, tumepata shida hata sehemu za magavana. Bwana Spika, shida ambayo imepatikana ni kwamba magavana waligeuza maneno. Sasa magavana wakataka kuwa kama marais, wakajiita His Excellency. Kwanza ilikuwa shida, mwisho ikawa tumekubali sisi sote Kenya tunawaita His Excellency kama rais. Na wao wakaanza kuiga mifano ya marais wa zamani, ya kwamba watachukua zile kabila zao waziweke katika serikali. Zile kabila ndogo ndogo ambazo pengine sehemu zingine ni kabila kubwa, wanakuta hawako serikalini. Bwana Spika, katika gatuzi la Tana River, Bwana Spika, gavana alipelekwa kotini kwa sababu mwananchi alisema kuna sheria ambayo imevunjwa. County Government Act inasema kabisa lazima zile nafasi uzigawanye, lakini magavana hawafuati, Bwana Spika. Na hii maneno lazima tuyaongee. Leo ukiwa Nairobi pengine kabila hilo ni kubwa, ukifika kwa kaunti ya Tana River utakuta kabila hilo, gatuzi la Tana River hilo kabila ni dogo. Lakini wao ni wana Kenya kama Wakenya wa huku. Tunataka tuwe na moyo wa kugeuka. Hii sheria, hii mswada ambao uko mbele yetu inataka kuzungumzia hili jambo, na nyumba ambayo mambo yanaongewa na yakapangwa kama wazee ni hapa. Na tunatuma ujumbe kwa magavana wote ya kwamba Kenya uiangalie kama nchi yako. Usitambue peke yake wale watu ambao walikupigia kura. Usitambue peke yake wale ambao ni kabila lako. Angalia katika serikali yako, na ukitengeza mawaziri wako, ukitengeza wengine, makatibu wako wa kudumu, tafadhali angalia ujue ya kwamba kuna Wakenya wengine hasa makabila madogo madogo. Ukiangalia leo kaunti ya Tana River, gatuzi hilo, utaona kuna makabila madogo madogo. Makabila yetu makubwa ni Wapokomo, wa Orma na Wardei, lakini kuna kabila kama Wata, kuna kabila wa Giriama ni wachache pale, Wakikuyu ni wachache. Utaona makabila kama Wailwana, Mnyoyaya. Ukiangalia katika serikali ambayo inaundwa, katika county public service, unaona ni nafasi kidogo sana ambazo zinaenda kwa yale makabila madogo. Saa ingine hata yale makabila makubwa unaona inaegemea pande moja, na ikiegemea pande moja inaegemea zaidi clan fulani ndani ya kabila hizo. Bwana Spika, tabia hizi mbaya za kisiasa lazima zikome, na hapa hii bunge ya Senate lazima tusimame kwa umoja, tuseme katika national government, katika county government, tuondoe mambo ya kuweka watu wetu kando, tulete mambo ya kuzungumzia Kenya kama Kenya moja na gatuzi kama gatuzi moja. Mtu asisikie kwa akitoka county hii hawezi kuishi kule kwa sababu hakuna nafasi, hawezi kwenda pale kwa sababu hakuna nafasi. Mtu asisikie hii Kenya, wacha mimi niende nikaishi Uingereza kwa sababu hii Kenya hata nikiwa na talent namna gani siwezi kupata nafasi kubwa hapa Kenya. Hivyo tunavyosema kwa national government, tunataka katika magatuzi yetu kuwe haki na usawa. Hii ndiyo hoja ambayo iko hapa mbele. Na mimi namshukuru mheshimiwa senator wa gatuzi la huko, mheshimiwa Cheptumo. Tunashukuru sana kwa kuleta haya mazungumzo, kwa sababu lazima tuyazungumze. Unajua kidonda kikiwapo kama hakiwekwi dawa hakiwezi kupona, na saa ingine dawa ni uchungu. Ukiweka kidonda dawa, saa ingine unasikia uchungu. Miaka yetu tulipokuwa wadogo tulikuwa tunawekwa dawa ya blue ingine inaitwa GV. Ukiweka ile unawashwa kabisa, lakini ndivyo kidonda kinapona. Lazima tuambiane ukweli. Kenya hii kuijenga, Kenya hii kuwa sauti moja, lazima katika magatuzi yetu tufanye ukweli kwa kabila zote. Lazima kwa serikali kuu tufanye ukweli kwa makabila yote. Ndio hii Kenya itembee sawa sawa na vile wananchi wetu wanatarajia. Na si kwa makabila peke yake, lakini pia kwa nafasi za kutoa uchumi, za kuwekezesha uchumi, kujenga uchumi, nafasi za kiserikali. Ndio tuwe na umoja wa ukweli, sio umoja wa mdomo kwa magatuzi yetu na kwa serikali kuu. Bwana Spika, mimi ningeomba maseneta wote ambao watazungumzia hoja hii ya mheshimiwa Cheptumo tuiongee ukweli na tusupport ili maombi ambayo tumeweka kwa hii motion ya kwamba zile wizara ambayo inahusika pamoja na sehemu za serikali ambazo zinahusika zilete mabadiliko ya kisheria na miungo misingi ambayo itasaidia Kenya hii iwe ni Kenya moja. Tusiseme Kenya hii ni moja lakini wengine wanaumia. Tunataka hii Kenya iwe moja kwa ukweli na kwa uhaki. Kwa hivyo naomba maseneta wote ambao wataizungumzia hii hoja waipatie kuunga mkono. Kwa hayo mengi machache niliongea, naomba sasa sijui Bwana Spika second Kiswahili itaenda namna gani hapo, lakini second, naomba second. Asante sana Bwana Spika.
Asante Senator. Honorable Senators, this motion was moved in an amended form. Therefore, Honorable Senators, I will propose the question in the amended form. That aware that Kenya is a multi-ethnic country with a rich diversity of cultures, languages, and traditions. Further aware that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities face significant social, economic, and political challenges, including discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Acknowledging that Articles 10, 2b, 21.3, 27, 56, 91, 1e, 100, 174e, 177.1, 204.3b, 216.4, and the fifth schedule to the Constitution of Kenya obligate the state to promote and protect the welfare of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities. Appreciating that the government has put in place policies, legal and institutional frameworks, including affirmative action programs to address the needs of other special interest groups, namely children, persons with disabilities, youth, women, and the elderly. Concerned that ethnic minorities and marginalized communities remain largely undressed through similar interventions due to lack of an existing national policy and legislative framework. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, the National Gender and Equality Commission, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, the Directorate of National Cohesion and Values in the Office of the President, and any other relevant state departments, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, 1, initiate measures to identify and address the specific needs and challenges faced by ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya, and 2, develop and implement national policy and legislative framework for the integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya as envisioned in the Constitution of Kenya. I now invite senators to make contribution. Senator Catherine Muma.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very, very important motion. And allow me to congratulate Senator Cheptumo for moving this motion. Mr. Speaker, this motion is about the implementation of the national values and principles as enshrined in our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I specifically want to point out Article 10, 1b, which talks about human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, non-discrimination, and protection of the rights of the marginalized. Mr. Speaker, that particular provision emphasizes the importance of the principle of equality. It speaks to equality, it speaks to equity, it speaks to social justice, talks about non-discrimination, and talks about inclusiveness. I am glad that the Honorable Senator has brought out the issue about the pain of the marginalization of ethnic communities, certain ethnic communities in this country. Mr. Speaker, ethnic exclusion, tribalism can be analogized to patriarchy. The pain you're feeling, Senator Cheptumo, is the pain that women feel, that the pain that persons with disability feel, the pain that these groups have always with passion tried to persuade this country that it is important that everybody is included. Mr. Speaker, I therefore wholeheartedly would want to ask that as a nation, we need to move to a level where we know that this country and the Constitution that guides this country contemplates a society where everybody matters, where everybody is important, and where every region, every section, is as important as any other. A society where development is planned in an equitable manner. A society where employment is done in an equitable manner. A society where we care enough to recognize that because of the bad manners of past governments, we have left behind our fellow citizens who are equal. And Mr. Speaker, this motion is asking us to therefore implement this article, Article 100, Article 204, which, Mr. Speaker, we have been discussing in this Senate, an article that set aside a special fund to try and bring development, particularly to areas that are marginalized. And areas that are marginalized are not just geographical, physical areas. These are areas that are occupied by people who would otherwise be elsewhere or who would be far if they were given similar opportunity as have been given to people in other regions. Mr. Speaker, I would want, even as we implement, that the mover requires that the National Gender and Equality Commission, which has specific mandate in relation to the minority, to actually bring out a policy, and I support, because equality and equalization has sometimes been narrowed to the issue of only gender, disability, youth, that we must find a way and a policy that specifically addresses the issues of ethnic minorities as persons who are also discriminated against in this country. But as we do so, Honorable Wakili, I'd like to request that we stay faithful to the interpretation in 260 about ethnic minorities. Mr. Speaker, I come from the Luhya community, and if 10 of us have settled in Murang'a, in a neighborhood, we have bought land there, I doubt that this law requires that as the 10 people, Luhyas who are in Murang'a, we need to be treated as the ethnic minority in similar manner as the El Chamus. That we will be asking for our own infrastructure, having gone there, knowing the Luhya community is among the big communities. So I want to ask that as we do the definition of ethnic communities, we stick to the interpretation as provided for within the Constitution. And as we do so, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that unless it is in policy, unless we have put a measure for performance, it will not happen. And that is why it has not happened since 1963. That's why it is not happening even though we have a constitution that has guidelines. I am proposing that you go further to require that we put in place a few indicators for the national government and other indicators for the county governments, so that every year in the state of address to the nation, the president should be able to tell us how the national government and the different ministries in the execution of their mandates have incorporated the needs of marginalized ethnic communities. If we do that, then we will be able to know that in 2023, the national government employed so many Ilchamus people in these parastatals. And we need, in that policy, to have identified at that time that these are the ethnic communities that we feel have been marginalized historically and need to be brought on board. If we put it that way, they will go out of their way to go and find that person from the ethnic minorities who is qualified in order to be employed. I suggest a similar standard be required of the county governments, so that as we also get reports from county governments, we are able to know how are county governments implementing this obligation of the Constitution, and what evidence do they have to show that they are implementing this particular responsibility. If we go about it that way, then we are able to pick in terms of tangible evidence of real inclusion of these people. Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, I also want to caution against the use of the word mainstreaming and integration. Mainstreaming and integration might mean assimilation. Mr. Speaker, we have had in JLAC an instance where we've had a community that was complaining about being integrated, being given an ID identification number that placed them with another community. That meant that as an ethnic community, they were actually being assimilated and being identified as the other community and not themselves. So integration sometimes can be exclusionary. And I'm suggesting that we must respect the identity of communities that want to be identified, even if they are few. So we should be talking about inclusion and not assimilation. So as we use mainstreaming and integration, we need to do so in a careful manner that it will not end up actually obliterating these communities from their own identities. Mr. Speaker, I hope with those few remarks, I will have enriched the motion as moved, but it's an absolutely important motion that we need to all support. I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wahome Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also like to support the motion by Senator Baringo, Senator Cheptumo. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is time that we as Kenyans aligned ourselves, knowing that we are a nation, and it does not matter the diversity that we have, Mr. Speaker, that has up to now been used to place others, Mr. Speaker. We need to embrace the diversity and know that in it we can draw a lot of strength. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've listened to Senator Mugatana seconding the motion. It is indeed very sad that 60 years after independence, we are still fighting the same battle of marginalization. And as he stated lightly, Mr. Speaker, we saw the white men walk out, the colonialists walk out, well, came in the black colonialists who have up to now successfully been able to suppress the interests of not only of the Kenyans, but of all the Kenyans at whole. The battle before us, Mr. Speaker, must be fought by us all. It must bring us together, united, to ensure that the future generation will never again stand up to discuss this motion, Mr. Speaker, what we are discussing today. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is indeed a great shame that a country that's 60 years old, we are still fighting the same issues that were fought 60 years ago. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to challenge us as senators that we must come up with measures, that we must come up with legislative frameworks that will ensure that the Constitution that we promulgated 2010 is indeed being implemented. And this cannot be done, Mr. Speaker, if we, as the Senate, we are still blaming the governors whom we should be oversighting for discriminating the minorities in their county. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a challenge that we must live up to, put up the right legal framework so that we ensure that nobody in this Kenya feels like an outsider. But I would also want to say, Mr. Speaker, successful governments have managed now to add into the groups of ethnic minority, to add another group of the downtrodden, and push Kenyans into poverty so that we do not have a voice to talk about our problem. Mr. Speaker, sir, united, and that is why we fought so hard with the Kenya Kwanza government to dismantle the shackles of bondage that has been put into us by the dynasties. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is why we are today standing and saying, after we conduct elections, we want to see the implementation of not only the Constitution, but we want to see people who respect it. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you know where we stand today, there are those who want to make us believe we are at crossroads. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot be the same names, Mr. Speaker, sir, that have successfully oppressed Kenyans today are telling us Kenya is at crossroads. We are not, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is simply because, Mr. Speaker, sir, those people in leadership today happen to come not from the big names, but from those who had thought that they could never rule this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to say, moving forward, this country, anybody born in this country, have an equal opportunity, and we must put measures in place to ensure that everybody, every one of us gets the equal opportunity, regardless of where you come from, whether marginalized, whether disabled, whether an ethnic minority. You must have equal opportunities. And it is the high time, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we as legislators put the legal framework in place to ensure that every child who goes to school in this country, regardless whether the father is known or unknown, that they have equal opportunity. We can never do that, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we have 1,000,001 examples of... Oh, hold my time, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll continue.
Yes, Senator. Senator Omatinga, you will have 11 more minutes to continue contributing when the motion returns. Honorable Senators, it is now 1 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 2nd August 2023 at 2:30 p.m.